panel about all of it. Errol Lewis, CNN political commentator and political anchor of Spectrum News. Jackie Kucinich is here, a political analyst and Washington bureau chief for the Daily Beast. And Jason Johnson, political editor at The Root and professor at Morgan State University. So nice to have you guys with us. Errol, let me begin with you. All right, so an indefinite hold for any of these meetings of the House Intel Committee that usually meets at least twice a week. The FBI director telling Manu Raju he's not going to even come forward until they can figure out their partisan bickering. Assess the level of disarray.
Well, there is a level of disarray. The good news, I guess, for the American people is that you've got the Senate Intelligence Committee moving forward.
Which you saw Susan Collins being like, we've got our ducks in a row.
Yeah, that's the good news. The bad news, though, is that, we have Representative Nunes and perhaps others like him who have fallen into the Trump trap, I would call it, where Trump makes this baseless charge and then expects others to clean it up for him. And so he looks around. Sean Spicer tries to do it from the podium. It doesn't work. They run and try and get the intelligence agencies to sort of back up this baseless charge. They refuse to play ball. The Senate refuses to play ball, the Senate leadership, the head of the Intelligence Committee. And so Nunes steps forward and actually does this, has harmed his career, has harmed the investigation, has harmed the committee. And, this is a warning shot, I think, about how this is going to work in Washington these days, where when the president is looking around for people and his aides can't do it, he'll put anybody in the crosshairs, and you have to think really carefully about whether that's the place you want to be.
The other bad news, this is serious stuff. We're talking about the House Intelligence Committee, and they deal with really important secret information. They have to be very careful about how they do it, and bipartisanship has been the name of the game for this committee most of the time in the past. Jackie, you're an old Washington hand.
Old?
Young at heart, though. Now, Chairman Nunes, how long can he sustain this? If you've got every Democrat asking for you to step aside, if you have people like Lindsey Graham not directly calling for it but start questioning his judgment, is he in trouble?
He's making a very good case for an outside investigation and undermining his own investigation. To your point, Adam Schiff, his ranking member, coming out and saying he should recuse himself, that's a big deal. This isn't like the Oversight Committee, which we talk a lot about, where you see the ranking member and the chairman constantly butting heads. It's not really a thing in Intel. So Errol's absolutely right. He has damaged this. Not only has he damaged the House investigation, but it's casting a pall on the Senate investigation, and they have to be very careful because that could invalidate what the Congress is doing and perhaps lead to something from the outside.
So when it comes to Speaker Ryan, he's the only one, as many people who might call for Devin Nunes to step aside, it's really just up to Speaker Ryan, and he, according to his aides, as late as yesterday evening, said he has full confidence in Devin Nunes. How long do you think Paul Ryan can sustain that? Because I'm just imagining what words he would be using if this were Democrats.
Well, I think one of the issues here is Paul Ryan doesn't have that much credibility with anyone right now either. I mean, he couldn't marshal in his own party to push through legislation. So him backing Congressman Nunes right now, it doesn't inspire faith. It doesn't make people happier. It's like, okay, well, this guy just blew it last week. Now we're supporting someone else who made a huge mistake that affects his credibility. None of these people have credibility right now. And I agree with the other panelists. I think this is moving towards an independent investigation. That's the only way that people who are concerned with American sovereignty and not just partisanship can get to the truth of what the connections are between this administration, if there are any, and Russia.
All right, we did just hear from Chairman Nunes seconds ago. We're getting that video turned around. We'll play that for you the minute it comes. By the way, I should note, there are no House Republicans who've called on Nunes to step aside. Jason makes the point that Paul Ryan is damaged political goods right now, maybe. But he's still leader of that caucus in the House of Representatives, and he has backed up Nunes until this point, and every other Republican in the House has as well. While we're waiting for that sound from Chairman Nunes, I want to bring up another sort of famous Republican that Democrats seem to love all of a sudden this morning because of what he has to say about Russia. Why don't you listen to former Vice President Dick Cheney, and few Democrats have ever said anything nice about him the last few years, but listen to what he says.
There was a very serious effort made by Mr. Putin and his government, his organization, to interfere in major ways with our basic fundamental democratic processes. In some quarters, that would be considered an act of war.
So the vice president, Errol's calling it perhaps an act of war, what Russia did. And most Republicans now were very serious about this investigation on Capitol Hill, but that's very different language than we heard from the president himself, really, up until now. He continues to call Russia a hoax, the whole Russia thing a hoax.
Well, that's right, as early as this morning, right? And I think that was one of this morning's tweets. Look, I think there's a danger of sort of going down this track about sort of ratcheting up the meaning of this meddling. We should understand in advance that there's never going to be a smoking gun. There's never going to be videotape of somebody tampering with a voting machine. That's not the nature of what happened here. I personally would be a lot happier if, whether it's Dick Cheney or anybody else, there'd be more talk about the human rights abuses. I mean, 60,000 people took to the streets in Russia to complain about corruption. A leading opposition figure who wants to run for president was seized and placed in custody. The same person was arrested the day after he announced a run for mayor of Moscow back in 2013. There were people who were coming up dead on videotape. This is really serious stuff. I mean, they are making war not so much against the United States, but against their own people as well. And it's a much broader discussion that needs to go on about
all the more
this.
reason that this committee should get its act together.
Guys, let me know if we have that tape ready to play, but the headline out of what Nunes just said is this. Listen.
Should move forward now that Democrats are calling for your recusal.
Moves forward just like it was before.
And you're not going to recuse yourself.
The investigation continues. We've had an investigation into Russia for many years.
Are you going to recuse yourself from this investigation, sir?
Excuse me.
Is that a no?
All right, there you heard him saying we've been investigating Russia for many years, and then you heard the journalist at the end there ask him, are you going to recuse himself? I could not hear her answer. I believe the team said it was a no,
It's
though.
a no, and he also said this investigation moves forward. But what you do see there, Jackie, clearly is, you can see, a man under fire. You can see a member. You've been up on Capitol Hill when members of Congress have been in the spot like that under fire, and that's what it looks like.
He's not walking as fast as some of them do, but
He's not running.
Yeah,
Well, that's actually a good point.
He's not running away.
from
He's
it.
not running away. He is answering questions.
And he's doing interviews. Look, he talked to Wolf last night, right?
Completely. So he is trying to address this, but he is in a bit of a spot here of his own making. And there has been this disconnect between the president and the Congress, including the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, on Russia. And the president just seems to be still viewing this through a personal prism, looking at this as a question of his legitimacy rather than Russians meddling in the United States election process. This is bigger than him. It always has been. And that's what you hear from the Hill versus what you're hearing from the White House.
Jason Johnson, final thought on what you think happened to Nunes and just this committee's ability to function for the American people at this point.
I don't think they're functioning for the American people, Poppy, and that's my big concern. And I think Errol and Jackie are right. On the one hand, you've got all of these things happening with Russian diplomats dying. It's like the end of Godfather 2. There seems to be this clearing out going on in Russia. And on the other hand, we have Americans who are denying that these connections are there. The American people deserve the truth. And if this Congressman Nunes is not capable or not willing to pursue that truth, only an independent commission can provide us with what we need to know as to whether or not our country is still sovereign or under the influence of an American enemy.
All right, Jason Johnson, Errol Lewis, Jackie Kucinich, thanks so much for being here, guys. Great to have you with us. This